Hello, welcome to another episode of Arthritis and You, A Joint Journey. Today, we've got something special lined up, so buckle up because it's time for the deep dive. Let's give a warm welcome to our hosts, Arthur and Sarah.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a condition that might sound a little intimidating at first, ankylosing spondylitis. AS for short.
That's right.
And we're really lucky to have with us today an expert who can help us break it all down.
Happy to be here.
So, you've probably seen the articles, maybe even skimmed a medical journal abstract or two, and now you want to get to the heart of what AS is really all about.
Exactly.
We're going beyond the basics today, folks. We're talking about what it feels like to live with AS, how doctors figure out who has it and who doesn't, and why understanding the difference between everyday back pain and inflammatory back pain, well, it's a big deal. So I was looking at this information from the Ankylosing Spondylitis Alberta Rheumatology website, and one sentence really jumped out at me. It says, Ankylosing spondylitis is an autoimmune disease which causes back pain and stiffness. Now, I've had my fair share of back pain. Who hasn't? So what makes AS different?
You really hit the nail on the head there. It's that word autoimmune. That's where things get interesting.
Okay, so walk me through it. What does autoimmune actually mean?
So picture this. Your immune system, it's like your body's security guard, right? But in AS, imagine that security guard suddenly starts attacking your own house instead of keeping intruders out.
Okay, that's not good.
Not good at all. Instead of going after those nasty viruses and bacteria, it mistakenly targets your body's own tissues. And that's what leads to inflammation.
So my immune system's basically gone rogue. But how does that translate into feeling stiff as a board, especially in the morning? Because I've definitely felt that.
Ah, yes, the dreaded morning stiffness. It's a real hallmark of AS. Basically, what happens is that inflammation tends to settle in your joints overnight while you're resting.
Yeah.
And AS often really likes to make itself known in the sacroiliac joints first.
Sacro what now?
Sacroiliac joints. They're the joints that connect your lower spine to your pelvis. Kind of important, right?
I guess so.
So that's why those joints in particular can feel so stiff and achy in the morning.
Makes sense.
And then as you start moving around, things tend to loosen up a bit throughout the day.
Interesting. So we've got this inflammation wreaking havoc, but how do I know if it's just like a regular backache from sleeping funny or something more like AS? How do you tell the difference?
You're asking all the right questions. That's a really important distinction to make, and it's why getting a proper diagnosis is so important. There are some telltale signs that can help distinguish between what we call regular mechanical back pain and the inflammatory back pain we see in AS.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the inside scoop.
All right, I will.
All right, so spill the tea. What are these telltale signs?
Well, one of the biggest clues is actually the age when the back pain first rears its ugly head.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inflammatory back pain, like the kind you see in AS that usually shows up earlier in life, often before someone hits the big four away. But mechanical back pain, that's more likely to develop as we get older.
Okay, that makes sense. So if someone's in their 20s or 30s and they're dealing with back pain that just won't quit, that should be a red flag, right?
Bingo. It's not a surefire sign, of course.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Right.
Another thing to think about is how the pain actually feels.
Yeah. Okay.
We were talking about that morning stiffness earlier and how it tends to ease up as you move around during the day.
Right.
It's very typical of inflammatory back pain. But with mechanical back pain, rest usually makes it feel better.
And it can even wake you up in the middle of the night sometimes, right? I remember that from the YouTube video. How do you diagnose ankylosing spondylitis?
You've got a great memory. That's
Okay.
another hallmark of inflammatory back pain.
Wow. Okay, so how else can you tell the difference?
Well, here's an interesting one. If you find that exercise actually makes your back pain better, that's another point in favor of inflammatory back pain.
Really?
Yeah, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but movement can actually help reduce that inflammation and loosen things up.
Huh. So all these little things, they really add up to paint a clearer picture of what's going on, huh?
Exactly. It's like putting together a puzzle or maybe even a detective case. Doctors use all the clues, your medical history, a physical exam, and then some specific tests to figure out if it's AS.
Speaking of tests, that website, the Ankylosing Spondylitis Alberta Rheumatology one, it mentioned a bunch of different tests. X-rays, MRIs. Oh, and something about a gene called HLA-B27. What is that? Some kind of magic test that tells you right away if you have AS.
I wish it were that simple.
So what's the deal with this HLA-B27 thing?
Well, the HLA-B27 gene is definitely linked to AS.
Yeah.
If you have this gene, it means you're at a much higher risk of developing the condition.
Okay.
But it's not a foolproof diagnostic tool.
What do you mean?
Well, there are lots of people out there who have the HLA-B27 gene but never end up getting AS.
Oh, wow.
And then on the flip side, there are some people with AS who don't have the gene at all.
So it's not a guarantee either way?
Exactly. It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Doctors look at it along with your symptoms and what other tests show.
Okay, that makes more sense. So what about these other tests? What are the doctors looking for when they do x-rays and MRIs?
They're trying to see if there's any evidence of inflammation or joint damage, especially in those sacroiliac joints we talked about.
All right.
X-rays are pretty good at showing later stage changes, like when the vertebrae start fusing together, which can happen with AS over time.
Oh, wow.
But MRIs, they're kind of like the high-tech version. They can actually detect inflammation in its early stages, even before it's bad enough to show up on an X-ray.
So it's like comparing an old-school magnifying glass to a super-powered microscope.
Exactly. MRIs give doctors a much closer look and can help them make a more accurate diagnosis.
Wow, technology is amazing. Okay, so let's say all the signs point to AS. What happens next? What's the outlook for someone with this condition? So someone gets this diagnosis, what happens next? What's the outlook like for someone with AS? It's got to be a lot to take in.
You're right, it can be a big moment. But hey, here's the good news. Even though there isn't a cure for AS, treatment has come a long way.
That's good to hear.
We're not talking about just accepting a life full of pain and stiffness anymore. These days, it's all about managing the condition and making sure you can still live your life to the absolute fullest.
That's so important. And I know the Ankylosing Spondylitis Alberta Rheumatology website, they talked about things like physiotherapy and NSAIs as first-line treatments. So what does that actually look like for someone with AS? What do they do?
Those are the big ones. Physiotherapy, that's like the foundation of managing AS.
Okay.
And it's not just about doing a few stretches here and there. We're talking about strengthening those muscles that support your back, working on your posture, and making sure you can stay flexible. It's all about giving your body the tools to fight back against those AS effects.
So it's like giving your body its own personal army to fight the inflammation.
Exactly. Empowering your body to take charge. And then we've got NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, as you mentioned.
Right. Those are familiar.
They're the big guns when it comes to tackling inflammation, which means they help reduce the pain and stiffness too.
Makes sense. So those are like the frontline strategies. But I also saw on that website in the related links section, they mentioned these things called TNF antagonists. Have you heard of those? What are those all about?
Oh yeah, TNF antagonists, they're a newer type of medication that have been a real game changer for a lot of folks with AS.
Really?
Oh yeah. They work by blocking TNF, which is a protein that's basically the ringleader of inflammation in your body. Think of it like this. TNF is the one who starts the fire. And the TNF antagonist, it comes in and cuts off the fuel supply.
Wow. So it's getting right to the source of the problem.
You got it. They've been shown to be really effective at handling the pain, slowing down how fast the disease progresses, and just overall making life better for a lot of people with AS.
It sounds like there are so many more options for people with AS now than there used to be. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And one thing that's really important to remember is that treating AS, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a journey.
So someone with AS really needs to advocate for themselves and work closely with their doctor.
100%. Open communication with your doctor, that's key.
Yeah.
Tell them about your symptoms, how you're feeling, what's worrying you. Having that open back and forth, that's what lets you adjust things as you go and make sure you're always getting the best possible care.
This has been amazing. We've really covered a lot of ground today. From understanding how AS is different from just your average back pain to figuring out how it's diagnosed and what the treatment options are. And we didn't even get too lost in the weeds.
And most importantly, you, dear listener, now have more knowledge, which means you can ask good questions, you can stand up for your health, and you can really be an active part of your own healthcare journey.
Knowledge is power, that's for sure. A huge thank you to our expert for taking the time to break all this down for us. It's been so interesting.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
And to you, our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into ankylosing spondylitis. We'll catch you next time.
This has been another episode of Arthritis and You, A Joint Journey, brought to you by the Rheum team from albertarheumatology.com, your trusted evidence-based suite of resources available 24/7. Straight from Alberta, but for folks around the world. Our hosts today, Arthritis and Sarah Upis. technical producer, John Ifan, and our executive producer, Stephen Cates. While we work hard to maintain the accuracy of our information, we accept no legal responsibility for any errors or omissions. Remember, always check with your own physician first. Join us next time for another Deep Dive.